eternal punishment for anyone who opens this casket.
The mummy. Is it dead or alive? Human or inhuman? You'll know. You'll see. You'll feel the awful, creeping, crawling terror that stands your hair on end and brings a scream to your lips. There's nothing on earth like the mummy.
You will not remember what I show you now, and yet I shall awaken memories of love and crime and death.
Now I know his horrible plan. He is going to kill her and make her a living mummy like himself.
Hello. Welcome to Movie Umpers. It's Halloween Hump Fest. I'm Bob Sham.
I'm Angela.
The sounds you hear may be dogs with the spooky, ooky sounds of ancient Egyptian pharaohs coming up. Look. Sorcerers. There's magic here.
They be doing magic in this movie.
Did you know that the Egyptian people are magical and mystical people?
I'm always surprised at how long the Hays Code lasted. It was 38 to 63?
Yeah, by the early 60s, it was people were trying to work around it.
But this was pre-Hays Code.
Yeah.
And it was surprising because we haven't watched too many pre-Hays Code movies. Folks are allowed to lay on top of each other and kiss and talk about making love when they're not married.
There's a few signs here. Yeah, that's a good sign that we're in pre-Hays Code. Another one is Zita Johann as Helen Grosvenor says the word toilet like 3 times. You never, in Hays Code movies, you never hear anyone say toilet. Because the Hays Code always has
that's too vulgar.
It's almost like some Brady Bunch fucking rule, right? There's just pointless little rules in Hays Code, or people would react to specific things, but it just seems striking. And another point where we get a flashback of Imhotep being mummified alive, and someone gets attacked, and you see a spear like through their body, like
it looked so
which
good.
Looked super cool.
Soldiers who killed them were also slain, so no friend could creep to the desert with funeral offerings for my condemned spirit.
Hays Code's like, nah, that's a little too gory.
Would there have been an issue with her final outfit?
I think so, probably. Even though, when you think about, Rita Hayworth and her flowing gown, there's something erotic about it. Like, you could, but
this was a lot of skin.
She seemed to have a lot, and throughout a lot of the movie, Zita Johann's character has a very low cut dress.
Yes.
It seemed like you could see like her breast at certain points.
You definitely got a glimpse. No nipple, but yeah, it was a little scandalous.
Every Monday for Halloween Hump Fest, we're going back and we're going to discuss the Universal Monsters, which were these huge hit movies in their day. A lot of movies in the 30s. And this being one of them, The Mummy from 1932, directed by Carl Freund, written by John Balderson, Richard Schayer, and Nina Wilcox Putnam, starring Boris Karloff, Zita Johann, David Manners, Edward Van Sloan, the original Universal Monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. These were all tremendously successful movies in their day. So successful in their time that it seems like Universal is still trying to trot them out from time to time.
Yeah.
We had a Mummy in the 90s that was a real big hit with Brendan Fraser in it, but it didn't feel like pure horror. It was more like action.
It was action adventure.
But people loved it.
Sure.
And they tried to bring the Mummy back again with a Tom Cruise movie that they were trying to do the Universal Monsters, and they got Cruise to do the Mummy. I haven't seen it, but no one seemed to care that much.
I don't care.
I'm a little curious about it.
I would watch it, but I completely forgot it existed until you just brought it up. The thing that surprised me about this movie, the only time he's really in rags is in the flashback where we see him get wrapped up. By the time we meet him, and I know we got to show Boris Karloff's face. You can't have him covered up the whole time.
Sure.
But there was never the classic, I'ma come get you in rags moment.
You think of the Mummy, or at least the cultural image we have of what the Mummy is in the pantheon of spooky monsters, right? And you picture a guy completely covered in bandages who's probably going to spend 90 minutes just walking around a tomb going, whoa!
And you can see maybe his fingertips and maybe his eyeballs. You can't sell this mummy costume as a universal monster. So it makes sense that they would play up the one time at the very beginning where he is mummified. Then he would just be a pharaoh.
I underestimated how Karloff he would be here. We got some archaeologists. They're up in Egypt land, and they're sent there by the British government to take stuff for the British Museum.
Later, we're in the Museum of Cairo, but they are there on behalf of the British government.
The British Museum, they still have items from other countries that they've looted over centuries. Mm-hmm. Although, if I was in England, I would probably go to the British Museum.
I would want to see it.
Because of how deeply historical everything is. But you have to keep in mind that all that shit's stolen, right? Or at least navigated through governments over the years that have been divided and split up by imperial powers to eat itself, and then use certain forces to be able to acquire certain things over the centuries of the British Empire. So you got these archaeologists that debate amongst themselves, like, is this for science or for are we just looting it? Well, it's for both, you know.
In this
You're looting
movie,
it for science.
They try to do a little propaganda in which our main character insists that it is all for science and it is none for looting. It is not for stealing. It's not for praise or glory. But
it is interesting that the question is there, though.
I do like that they discuss it at all, that it is questioned. You're right. I do like that.
That even in 1932, people were thinking about, like, is this really morally right to just take all these items from this country?
And the answer is no. They also are pissed because the stuff they find, they have to leave in Cairo. They have sort of a British museum office at the Museum of Cairo. Early beginning, we have our main character. He's the main archaeologist. He calls in his friend who is an occultist, and they have this young assistant who's taking photographs and categorizing everything or cataloging everything. They have found Imhotep.
Well, it seems to me that box we dug up today with the very peculiar gentleman over there is the only find we've made in the past 2 months that'll bring this expedition any medals from the British Museum.
We didn't come to dig in Egypt for medals. Much more is learned from studying bits of broken pottery than from all the sensational finds.
They're looking at his whole situation, and they notice that it's been defiled, but they're the first ones that ever found it, which means the people who buried him scraped off all the protections, beat up his casket.
And there's another important detail in that when they're mummified in ancient Egypt, they take out the organs and shit.
He had all his organs, and he was twisted, which means he was fighting, so they know he was buried alive. They bound
him up alive, and we do see, we know Imhotep comes back to life, but yeah, we get a flashback of that occurring to him, and it's pretty dark.
Yeah, he's buried with a small casket that contains the scroll of Thoth. And the men suspect that's what's in there, but it has all kinds of curses on it. And so the occultist says, do not open it. The man who's the scientist says, let's go talk outside. So he's trying to convince his occultist friend to open it with him. Meanwhile,
there's an
young
assistant in
boy
there.
cannot contain himself. It's almost as if it's calling to him. He cannot focus on anything else. It wants to come out of the box. So he opens it.
And there's a
scroll. He spreads it out. And then
he reads a scroll.
Yeah, he starts reading it.
What he reads brings Imhotep back to life, and we see it looks really cool when he comes back to life and his eyes open. I mean, Karloff is pretty cool.
The best part is that they don't, this part's extra scary because they don't give you a full front on he's standing in front of this boy image of him.
Yeah.
You see a handprint, you see his hand reach out, you see like the trailings of his rags as he walks out of screen. But the guy is so scared that he is hysterical and loses his mind in that moment. He goes crazy, like, we're going to take you away and put you in a padded room crazy.
It implies later that this guy died in a mental assignment.
Laughed until he died.
Imhotep becomes Ardith Bey and a society man. It's a decade after that point.
They say it because it's 10 years later, and our science man, what is their last name?
Wimple. David Manners is Frank Wimple.
His son is now in Egypt. And it is 10 years later, and they're talking about how 10 years ago your dad found this mummy and it got stolen. Our man, Boris Karloff, walks up in present day clothing and gives them this artifact from this woman's tomb and says, hey, I live here, so I can't dig this up, but you can because you have permission to dig.
I'm not sure what the fuck that's about, that Egyptians can't dig it up, or is it more of a cultural thing that they don't want to?
Well, they hired people who obviously live there to work for them. Maybe they had permits to dig. He also waited, I don't know if you caught this, he waited until everyone else in their group was gone. They had to hire people to come back and like locals to dig this up. They find this never broken. This was pretty cool when they find the stairs down to this tomb and they show the seal of the 7 jackals. Yeah. And that means this door has not opened since this woman died. That was really fucking cool.
The woman is Princess Anck-Sin-Amon. Ardith Bey, who's Imhotep, has a plot that he wants to essentially resurrect her, or at least spiritually in some way. And there's this woman named played by Zita Johann, Helen Grosvenor.
Imply that she's
half Egyptian.
That tomb.
What tomb?
Surely you read about the princess.
So you did that?
Yes. The 14 steps down and the unbroken seals were thrilling. But when we came to handle all her clothes and her jewels and her toilet things, you know they buried everything with them that they used in life. Well, when we came to unwrap the girl herself...
How could you do that?
Had to. Science, you know.
And her ancestor, because there's many comments that she looks just like her. In the flashback of what happened to her back in the 3,700 years ago, same character plays her.
Where was I when I fainted, Mr. Wemple?
Oh, outside the museum.
What was I doing there?
I wouldn't know that, would I?
No, I don't suppose you would. I wish I did.
Well, you see, I was waiting for...
Let's not talk about it.
Same woman plays
He
her.
wants to spiritually resurrect Anck-Sin-Amon in the form of Helen Grosvenor.
He doesn't realize that's what he's doing. He's trying to raise the body from the dead. She is drawn to the museum where he is in a trance. He doesn't realize until later when he meets her and is so drawn to her and she says that she passed out because she was trying to get into the museum. That's when he realizes, and he's like, oh God, yeah. I know you.
It is a little bit like a faded, like it's a dark ass love story, but it kind of is one, right?
And she's drawn to him, and listen, he is 3,700 years old.
Yeah.
And he does look creepy as fuck. Like, his makeup is great. They show very close up on his kind of really wrinkly drawn face.
Looks
it looks
awesome.
so good.
1,000 pardons. I am Ardith Bey.
I'm Helen Grosvenor.
The Helen Grosvenor character, or Zita Johann, who's playing her, I want to talk about the look of her. You know, when we watch 90s movies, especially movies that take place near the end of the 90s, we're always commenting on women's plucked eyebrows.
We were doing our eyebrows in the 90s to look like these women.
Yeah,
I did it.
I think that was a part of what inspired that
It
throwback.
was.
It just seems like in the 90s that women were really bad at it at the same time. Like there was a lot of plucked eyeballs that looked like shit in the 90s.
Hers did too in this movie.
I guess
they
so.
were not even. I kept noticing it because it was like jagged on one side, or maybe it was just the way her face was shaped, but it wasn't good.
She's kind of gangly, right?
It's almost like
her posture's weird. She's kind of like hunched a little bit.
She's like pooching her stomach out even too. Like the way she carries herself, it's like she's leading with her hips forward.
I forget the actress's name, but Gloria, who played the older Rose, who was in The Old Dark House, which came out earlier this year, earlier the same year as this movie. She had that posture as well. Like there was something about it was indicative of a look, a style of the time. Like not every woman was like that.
Yeah.
But you look at the old starlets, especially in this pre-code era, coming out of silent film, and there are these starlets that seem like
they're slinky.
Yeah.
Like, you know the old cartoons where it's like limbs are longer than they're supposed to be? That's what it makes me think of. Like people are like, ooh, how are you? And she's got the very close to her head, kind of Clara Bow, Betty Boop waves, but they're very close to her head.
She has like this round, almost perfectly round head on this.
Did you notice
body.
she was missing a tooth, or she had like a tooth thing?
Perfect.
I know. The thing that's so great is that she is obviously beautiful, but imperfect. And I love that the most because she's real.
But she was considered a straight up dime in this time.
Well, yeah, she is. There wasn't the focus on you have to be airbrushed perfect.
Yeah.
Like there is now.
Yeah, I mean, there was no real airbrush perfect.
I
that
know.
was maybe developing in the day. The standards of beauty were closer to what was more accessible back then, you know?
Which is very attractive.
This movie is not very long. That's kind of what's great about the Universal monster movies. They're not really drag out very much. They kind of get to the meat, but he wants to... It's a weird form of necrophilia, right?
Because it's the dead person who's trying to fuck the live person.
Mm-hmm.
That's backwards.
Oh, he has a gazing pool, which he can induce heart attacks in people, which he does.
If he can see you in the pool, he can magic you to death. Okay.
Why wouldn't he kill Frank Wimple, who's trying to get in on his lady?
He tried to.
It seemed like it didn't work, though. I thought
because
Imhotep can throw down harder than that.
Opposite of Imhotep in this movie is our occult doctor. Don't know why, but our main girl is staying with and being treated by the occult doctor. When they find this woman and bring her to the museum, they call Frank's dad, who found Imhotep 10 years before, and he comes so he can like get the whole situation together in the museum. They discover that someone's fucking with her because a guard is killed in the museum.
Right.
And at the same time, the son, Frank, finds our main girl passed out in front of the museum because she was under this spell. When they get in the room together and Imhotep and she are standing with each other, it is truly electricity going between these two people. And you look at them and it doesn't make sense.
They're also just interesting to look at individually separate. So when they come together, it's like,
Our Death Bay, Dr. Miller. I accept your invitation, but I find no solitary student with his books. I fear my visit is inopportune.
And the fact that they don't give a fuck about anyone else in that room. This is really well acted.
I was rooting for Imhotep and
I kind of was too.
And Grosvenor to get together. We were commenting on a man who was supposed to be like a servant.
They call him the Nubian.
He's called the Nubian, who appeared to be shoe polished up. Well, that was played by a guy named Noble Johnson. He was darkened up, but he is he was considered a black man, an African American man, as you would say.
Okay, but they did that to make him look.
But he was also
darker?
pretty light skinned.
Okay.
So throughout his era in Hollywood, he's a buff dude, so he'd play the more buff, quiet type.
Yeah.
But he would play black men and white men like throughout his career.
Interesting.
But he was technically a black man, probably mixed race. I didn't find too much information on him, but Yes, but he was light-skinned.
So he wasn't in blackface. He was heightening that part.
They did darken him up, but he is a black man.
That's really interesting. The key is this scroll, which is a scroll that has the words where Isis raised Osiris from the dead back in before them. And so that's the one he was using. And he finally gets her alone and gets her to his house where he has this pool that he can see. At this point, he's killed the dad already. He knows he's gotten the scroll back, I believe, and he has her at the house, and he says to her,
"You will not remember what I show you now, and yet I shall awaken memories of love and crime and death."
And he shows her the whole movie of what happened to them. She died. She was very sick, and he was by her bedside, and he was just so lovesick that he went and stole the scroll of Thoth, but he got caught trying to raise her from the dead,
punished,
and that's why he was buried alive.
She has to die, I guess, in some form. She has to die in a way that's similar to him.
Because he wants her to live forever. If she stays in this body, she's going to die
and
forever.
Then Ankh-Sun and Amon will resurrect it within this form of Mrs. Grosvenor. David Manners as Frank Wimple. Reading the cast list here. He survives the attack through the pool.
Yes,
and he comes to...
The reason he survives...
To cock-block this scenario of true love.
The occult doctor gives him this necklace that he had been bringing to the father to protect him, but the father had already been gotten. So he gives the necklace to the boy to protect him. Well, he's so worried about the girl that he wraps the necklace around her doorknob, and also so that if she leaves, he'll hear it. And while he's not protected, that's when Imhotep tries to kill him, and he stumbles to the door and grabs the jewel or the necklace right before he dies.
Yeah.
So he's passed out, but he's not dead.
Okay, well, he's back up and he goes to rescue. So what happens?
So in the museum, they have prepared to kill her, and he starts burning. Imhotep burns the mummy body, and he says he's going to also burn her so they can combine and come back to life. But she realizes that she doesn't want to die. She's now been given a second chance, and she knows herself well enough to know that, yes, it's her from the past, but there's also someone else inside of her, and she doesn't want to kill that person. And so when the guy comes in, he's able to yell for her and bring her back a little bit.
The Isis part.
But the Isis part...
Praying to Isis here?
Oh, Isis, holy maiden, I was thy consecrated vestal. I broke my vows. Save me now. Teach me the ancient summons, the holy spells I've forgotten. I call upon thee as of old.
She prays to Isis to save her, and the statue of Isis comes to life.
Lifts its arm.
And vaporizes
reverses Imhotep, and he dissolves into dust.
She was like a princess of Isis. She served Isis.
The gods are real.
The gods are real.
The Egyptian gods are real. That was really cool when the Isis arm just starts lifting, and it's like, we're watching it, we're like, oh shit, you're fucked now.
There was a moment when he, in the past, stole the Thoth thing from the Osiris, where it started to lift its arm, and he got out of the way before it shot him.
So that is the mummy, and, I think Helen Grosvenor should have been with Imhotep. She should have let him do this. I think she would have figured it out, would have lived to eternity.
Did you notice when she got freaked out was when he touched her and it was like dust
on
her
dust
arm?
On her arm.
Like, wait, you're dead.
He's ashy after a decade. He's still ashy as shit.
There's a point where Daddy Whipple tries to take him by the arm.
Your pardon, I dislike to be touched. An Eastern prejudice.
An Eastern prejudice.
An Eastern prejudice.
Just like that. All right, so we give this 1 through 5 each. What do you give The Mummy by Karl Freund, starring Boris Karloff?
4.25.
Oh, I'm going to give it a 3.75. So that bounces out to an 8. Check it out. The Mummy by Karl Freund from 1932, the classic Universal monster movie, is in between The Terminator by James Cameron And a movie that starred Boris Karloff that we mentioned earlier that came out that same year, The Old Dark House, directed by James Whale. The Mummy is as good as those movies, if not better. And it is fun. It is a fun movie. I like The Mummy. I like your mummy. I just want you to stop and imagine your mummy getting railed.
Robert.
Check the show notes for links and other places to find us. It's Halloween Hump Fest, 5 days a week, all month long. We're just now really getting into our themes. Different every day of the week has its own theme. Universal Monster Mondays, and tomorrow we start John Carpenter Tuesdays.
Yeah.
John Carpenter movies every Tuesday this month. It's a good time on Halloween Hump Fest. So yeah, like, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what's your favorite Universal Monster movie, your favorite Karloff.
Happy Halloween.